Joanna Penn, writer, podcaster, speaker, and general multi-talent, thank you very much for coming on the Pay to Play podcast.
No worries, Rob. It's always nice to talk to someone in Australia. It's been a while since I was there.
Well, hopefully we'll see you in our fair shores soon. And funnily enough, I was actually born in the UK, so...
There you go.
Indeed. But enough about me. You, from what I gather, are an absolute lover of the written word. Can you remember how long you've loved writing and reading for?
Well, my mum says that, as a child, a young child, kids carry around a teddy, in their prams and things. And I only ever had books. If I came into her room in the middle of the night, I would be dragging a book with me. And so I think it's pretty much been a very long time. But certainly I've always been a reader and I've always written sort of journals and things. But, like many people, didn't really realize that it could be a living until to be fair, it probably hasn't been a great living until the internet came along. So but it's certainly been all my life, really.
Yes, it certainly seemed that writing for the longest time is either you're a bestseller or you're lucky enough to scrape it out in the mid-list, or then forget it. There's no way you'll make a career. So when you actually did start your working career, I don't believe it was actually at least directly involved in the literary field at all, was it?
Well, I have a master's degree in theology from Oxford, which involved writing a lot of essays, and then I became a management consultant and started working in the corporate world. And again, the writing was business writing. I mean, everything is writing. It's just, I think there's a big difference between writing business documents and writing stories. Although I write nonfiction, but there's a lot more of the personality. I think that the problem with the corporate world and a lot of technical writing, I mean, a lot of people do make a living with technical writing or freelance writing, but most of the time it doesn't have personality and it's not that creative. Whereas now there's a lot more, creative writing in terms of novels, but also in the nonfiction market. The most popular nonfiction now is kind of narrative nonfiction with many more stories in, much more personality. So I think that's also partly to do with the blogging sort of change and the way people would rather connect with individuals than with corporations, for example.
I'm brought to mind of the bloggess who has her book, what was it? Let's Pretend This Didn't Happen, has become something of a smash bestseller, and she's put out another one, and it's all just pretty much kind of her stream of consciousness style that people come to on her blog every day.
I'm not aware of her. I guess that's in Australia. I'm in London now, so I'm not really
that's
into
quite
the
all right.
Australian scene as such.
Oh, no, she's actually a US writer.
Oh, okay.
So a writer and blogger, and yes, she definitely has a very offbeat way of looking at the world. But anyway, when did perhaps the penny drop for you that not only that you wanted to write fiction, but that it was a possibility that you could make a go of it?
Well, I started blogging when I was living in Australia. So I was still working my corporate job, and I wrote my first nonfiction book and started blogging about self-publishing and about book marketing and learning all about that. And at the time I was part of the Australian blogging scene with Yara Starak at Entrepreneur's Journey and Darren Rouse at ProBlogger, and I was going along to a lot of events. So at that point, my journey was very much, I'm going to become a blogger and a professional speaker and write nonfiction, which is what many bloggers do, and do courses and that type of thing. So I was happily writing nonfiction books, but I was really interested in how else, in terms of blogging, I was kind of bored with blogging just about nonfiction, and I thought, well, maybe I should check out NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, nanowrimo.org, which is in November if people are interested at some point, and that is the aim there is to write 50,000 words of a book, fiction novel, in a month. So I thought, well, that would be really interesting kind of experiment, and decided to do it, not really thinking that it would lead anywhere. And I ended up with 20,000 words of what turned into my first novel about 14 months later. I was living in Brisbane at the time. I went along to Queensland Writers Centre, which is fantastic, and did a course there for write a novel in a year. And so basically spent about a year and a half learning about writing fiction, and there was absolutely no way in my head that I was going to make any money from it at the time. It was, it was an interesting thing to be doing intellectually while I was still working at my day job. And I was at the same time still writing nonfiction and doing courses and speaking and all of that. And then, I found I really enjoyed it, and I wrote a couple more novels, and then last year, pretty much, I decided to switch my focus. Really pursue the fiction path in a much more concentrated manner. But it's been 9 years since I started writing nonfiction, and I published my first novel 4 years ago. So it's been just kind of a long journey of both things, and I still do everything. I write fiction, non-fiction, and speak and blog and podcast, as you said. So I think for most writers, this is not a you can't go 100% in with any one of these things. I think for me, I love all of them, and it's good to have multiple streams of income as a creative.
There does seem to be that mindset still that you have to be earning your money from one thing. People don't, I think, sometimes struggle with that idea that it is possible to actually set up multiple things that people will actually pay you to do, and that in a way you've got a more stable base than that feeling that having that income stream from the one thing that if that drops off, then you're in dire straits. How do you actually manage your time in terms of making sure that all your bases are covered?
This morning, I got up about 6, and I've just been at the cafe this morning for a couple of hours, and I've spent 2 hours on my latest novel. So, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning here in London right now. So, I've pretty much, on my wall, I have you made art today? And every day I have to create something new. So, I've already created something new today. I've got my words in for my novel. So that's my first thing every day is I have to get words done or something done on the latest fiction or non-fiction book or course or speaking day, so I have to have something new done in the world every day. And then a lot of, and most days I'll spend longer. I normally am there till probably 11. And then I will get on with the other stuff, which like today I'm just doing email newsletter, keeping in touch with my list. I've got a podcast episode for my podcast that I'm recording. I'm doing some editing on another project. So basically every day I'm pretty much creating something, preparing something for production, because this is, I think, the big difference between people who write, or not just write, people who create for fun or for a hobby, and then people who create in order to make a living. It's kind of both, and I realise your show is both. But if you are doing this for a living, then you actually have to prepare your work for going out in the world. And that involves, with writing, that involves editing, and that involves working with cover designers and, talking to people on the phone or, doing all the stuff around marketing. And I've got a promotion on later today, so I'll be looking at all my my page ranks and sorting all that stuff out. And I'm speaking at a 4-day conference this week, so I'm preparing that. And so, there isn't an average day, but certainly every day I'll be doing something on creating new stuff. And every day I'll be focusing on the production side and also some time on the marketing side. So it's kind of a bit of everything, which makes it a very interesting living.
I think one thing that tends to really separate the amateur from the professional, you've mentioned that you have to have your things ready to present, no matter what they are, that it's not enough just to create, but to make sure that it is in the best possible state that you can make it. When you give it to other people. But I guess there is also kind of a stage behind that where you have to make it a decision that your work is worthy of getting out there. Or did you ever have that kind of struggle? I remember at one point when you were looking at fiction writing, you almost felt there was... you felt at first that you had to write something literary before you actually... decided to get behind what you'd written, that first draft for Pentecost, and that wonderful creation of yours, Morgan Sierra, who I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about, especially for the pay-to-play audience who perhaps haven't encountered her and her adventures in Pentecost and its sequels yet. What did you? How did you find overcoming that mindset of believing that, you know, it was just for fun and that perhaps it wasn't something that other people would want to read?
Well, I never went into writing a novel just to keep it in a drawer. I mean, I have right next to me now, I have about 30 notebooks that I've been writing my own diaries for a very long time. And so those are not for publication. So when I thought about writing a novel, it was always going to go out there. And at the time I had an audience. But I mean, the fear of judgment and the fear that you're not good enough, and the fear that you'll be rejected and get 1-star reviews and that people will think you're crap. I don't know any a creative person who doesn't feel that way. Every single project you put out, you're going to feel that way. I think it's an inherent part of the process. And certainly, books like Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, and Stephen King's On Writing and Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. These are books that I read over and over again to help me feel better about the issue of self-confidence and self-doubt, which we all have. And so I would say to people, if you're feeling that, look, everybody feels that. It never goes away, even if you're Stephen King. So don't worry about that. I think J.K. Rowling, for example, who's been writing crime books under Robert Galbraith, because she got such flack for writing The Casual Vacancy under her real name, under J.K. Rowling, people just ripped her apart. And bless her, the richest author in the world has to use a different name because she was so attacked by the public. And I mean, when you think at that level you'd be immune to it, but even someone that amazing is not immune. So that would be my comment on sort of the self-doubt. And what you have to do is think, well, if you don't put it out in the world, then, well, one, you'll never know, but two, you'll never be able to move into the next book. And this is one of the big issues I see with people who write the so-called literary novels and do MFAs and just constantly seem to spend time in workshops rather than actually publishing. I know people who've spent 10 years writing one book, and to be fair, they're going to be much better writers if they write one book a year for 10 years or even 2 books a year for 10 years. So that's kind of my aim, is to become a better writer by writing more books. And of course, I'm just writing my 7th novel at the moment. Of course this novel's going to be better than my first novel. I mean, how can we not assume that? I mean, it's crazy. You get better with practice. The more you write, the better writer you're going to be. So all of these things are things that you just kind of learn over time. But Morgan Sierra, my main character in the Arcane series, she's basically my kick-ass alter ego, and she's sort of female Indiana Jones, and brings in all my sort of the movies I love, all the Bond movies and Con Air and explosion movies and stuff like that. And but basically Arcane is a secret agency that's under Trafalgar Square in London, and they go around investigating supernatural and sort of religious-based mysteries around the world. And it's a lot of fun. It's a super fun series. There's 7 books in the series now, and the latest is One Day in New York. And yeah, it's really good fun. I'm certainly going to carry that on, and I find fiction pretty addictive, so I do see this as something I'll be doing until the day I die.
There is definitely something about writing a real adventure story, isn't there? That just you can't help. Even when you wrap it up, there are always more adventures that you can't help but want to discover word by word.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have a list on my. I use the Things app on my phone to keep ideas, and it's got hundreds and hundreds of little things that I see all the time, or pictures, or I get ideas from everywhere. And the difficulty is really deciding which idea to turn into a book, and also because it's too easy to kind of do another book in the same series because that's faster and. It's a real, I mean, it's a challenge like anything creative. You're challenging yourself and, trying to learn new things at the same time as balancing that with trying to write something that people might actually buy. But yeah, on that, just going back to that literary point, I think that, and one of the talks I give is very much about making a living from your writing, and the fact that most people who write literary novels don't make a living writing. They make a living teaching writing, or, even the biggest literary prizes in the world, barely give you enough to live on. So I made a decision, even though I went to Oxford, my mum was an English teacher, I come from a very sort of literary family. I made the decision to write more commercial fiction because it's really fun and it's entertaining, and I enjoy action movies as much as the next person, and B, also that just the decision to want to be a well-loved author like Stephen King. So, that's kind of it's like, do you want to be Stephen King or Hilary Mantel? And I think the two are, you can like both books, but it's like whose career path do you want to follow? And I'd say that for anybody, listening, too many people give advice about writing when they don't necessarily make a living from it. So if you want to make a living from writing or painting or, whatever else you enjoy doing, take advice from people who are actually making a living doing what you want to do rather than other people.
Yeah. And the good news it is definitely much easier to make a living out of it nowadays. So how have you found moving into that publishing world of Amazon and Smashwords, and putting a book out in electronic format as well as paperbacks on store shelves?
And audio, don't forget audio, which is
of course
a massive new market. But yeah, I mean, like everything, like any new skill, I mean, learning to write a novel was hard. Learning to write nonfiction, I mean, writing a book is hard. But publishing is one of those skills, like blogging, for example, in podcasting. I mean, you've clearly learned how to set up a website. You've learned how to do a podcast. You've learned about the technical stuff. We all have to learn these various skills to do stuff in the world. You could say the same of cooking or anything. So publishing, to me, self-publishing, and I use specifically Amazon KDP iBooks, and iTunes Connect for iBooks, Kobo Writing Life, and then I use Draft2Digital and Smashwords for the library market. And it's a case of learning how to do it. Once you've done it once or twice, it's really, really easy. So I can publish a book in about a couple of hours. That's all it takes to publish. Publishing is nothing. The thing that takes the time is writing and marketing. So, but the first time you do it, yes, of course, there's a steep learning curve, which is why, at my blog, thecreativepenn.com, I share, like all the lessons learned and how to do this stuff so that people can avoid the scams. This is the other thing, is it's actually free to self-publish on these websites. It's free to publish ebook, print book, and audiobooks on Amazon. So they take a percentage when you actually sell something, which to me is a very fair business model. I know a lot of bookstores don't like them, but most bookstores won't take independent authors. So, but I'm most excited about the global market. So my books have actually sold now in 65 countries around the world. And the growth in, sub-Saharan Africa, South America, Asia is just massive. So, I'd urge people to think beyond just America, UK, Australia, and think about these massive emerging markets where essentially people are in the cell phone economy. Most people in the world do not live anywhere near a bookstore, and I know many people in Australia don't, to be honest. But the people who've bought my books in Nigeria or Namibia or Colombia, these are people buying on cell phones. So I think we're seeing a big shift in the world, and also print. Just this month in the UK, online print sales have overtaken in-store print sales. So having print for sale online with print on demand, having audiobooks, it's a shifting world.
It certainly is. I've just recently changed jobs out of the newspaper industry and have seen some massive changes there. There definitely seems to be a bit of a struggle for newspapers at the moment to find their new place in amidst this world of 24/7 up to the moment online news. And I can sort of see perhaps a certain similar sentiment in at least the traditional publishing industry, this fear that print books, or at least the traditional model of printing, is going to vanish. Do you still feel, I mean, from the sounds of it, you still see evidence that print is not going away, but it is finding a new niche for itself? Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, I mean, print book prices in Australia are utterly ridiculous. I hope you'd agree. I mean, they are crazy. The reason I am such an amazing advocate for ebooks is because I was in Australia, and the price of it, because I read so much. I read 3 to 5 books a week, basically. I'm a huge reader. So, and in Australia, a brand new paperback's like $30.
Yes,
which is just crazy. I mean, in Britain, it's sort of £4.99, which is about $10. So it's a lot cheaper here. But in Australia, I just could not. Even though I had a really good job, I couldn't afford to buy all the books I wanted. And then as soon as it was the Sony Reader that came out first in Australia, but it didn't really have a good store. And then I was basically one of the first people in Australia to get the Kindle, and was converted, immediately, because I could now get cheaper books. And so then the result of that was, when we moved back to England, we got rid of over 2,000 print books that we had in our house in Australia to move back to the UK, not to ship them all, because both my husband and I had shifted to digital. So I actually will blame the Australian print booksellers for my shift to digital, because it's just unaffordable to do that. So that would be one thing, I think, and again, like I said, I mean, you have to, the model of the traditional publishing and the print model is that they buy a stock of paper at the beginning of the year, and they have to print a certain number of books to make the money, from that. So it is a very print-based model. Whereas for the creative, I write a story, or I write a book that will inspire you or educate you. Why does the format matter? If you listen to that on audio, if you read that in an ebook, or you read it in print on demand, then there's no difference in the content. So to me, I'm not a massive print fan in terms of mass market paperbacks or hardbacks. What I do like, and I do think is the role of print now, is the more interesting print books. So, oversized print, much more visual stuff in print, anything where the format actually does bring a benefit to the person consuming it. So the books I have now are mainly, oversized. They are full of images, they are lovely gift objects, and they're much more expensive. So I will pay £30, £40. I've paid over £100 for a print book that I want to own as a beautiful object. So that's where I see the world going with print. It's like, no, I'm not going to pay $30 for the latest mass market, action adventure thriller from Penn. And I'm very happy, I want to write books that people consume for fun, and, they don't need to read them again. How many people read mass market fiction or non-fiction more than once? And then buy beautiful books, special editions with, handcrafted materials, artisan objects that people will love and keep, and then stop putting hundreds of thousands of copies into the landfill, which if people investigate the pulping of most book runs will realize that it's just hideous. So yeah, I think I do have some strong opinions on print, and I do think customers and price play a big role in that.
Now we're coming to the end of the time that we have, which is unfortunately far too short. But one thing I always ask my guests is that if there were perhaps three things, and you've already given plenty of advice in this podcast, by the way, but if there were three things that perhaps you wish, looking back, someone had told you at the beginning that you've learned in the meantime, and that might maybe help somebody else who is mustering the courage to actually write a novel or put their work out there, what would you tell them? What would those three things be?
Well, there's nothing I wish someone had told me, but in terms of my advice, one would be do your due diligence. The number of people who go blindly into publishing contracts or, work with co-publishing models, as they're sort of being called. There's a lot of companies who are trying to make money from creators now. And so do your due diligence around contracts, whoever they are with, and really make sure that you check up with other authors. There's a lot of authors blogging, podcasting, and sharing information about self-publishing, writing, marketing online. So do your Google and find out about this stuff before you make a mistake or spend any money. In fact, that would probably be the number one thing. And then secondly is things are look beyond just your own country. I mean, just with Australia, there's 20 million people. It's tiny compared to America's 280 million. There's more English speaking people in India than there are in Europe. I think it's kind of crazy how the world is. So think about the fact, if you have whatever you have a book, non-fiction or fiction, that your audience is actually global. And even if you do say you sell a book deal in Australia, think about publishing yourself in some of these other markets, because these are growth markets essentially in a cell phone economy, as Google and all these companies look to bring another, I think it's 4 billion people online in the next couple of years. And by 2017, the cell phone penetration will be around 70%. So, really be looking forward to what the global economy is going to look like in a couple of years. And then the third thing is really just what I have on my wall here, which is, have you made art today? It's very easy to get caught up in you must do social media, or you must start a podcast, or you must do this and you must do that. But actually,
yes,
at heart, the reason we do the work we love is because we love doing the work. So, and it is work, it's work, and it's kind of type 2 fun, as a friend of mine says, which is, it might not be fun while you're doing it, but it's fun at the end when you say, I made this. So yeah, and find a community as well. That's what I'd say. I'm part of the Alliance of Independent Authors, which is a global community, an organization for professional self-publishers, I guess, authors who are taking this very seriously as creative entrepreneurs. And, so there is a community. This is not a lonely career anymore. It is a brilliant one, full of people who are going for it. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, I love what I do. And I certainly have Australia to thank for this, because the other thing, we didn't talk about it, and I was in Australia in 2008 working at a large mining company, and got laid off in the global financial crisis along with 400 other people. And that was pretty much the day when I said, I need to do something else with my life. The fact that they can just turn around and lay 400 people off in one day, there is no stability here. And I know the Australian economy is suffering again now as things...
That it is, yes.
Yeah, it's really changing. So people in Australia... it's like, and now it's another time to wake up and, smell the global entrepreneurial coffee and start replacing some of your income with things that aren't reliant on the Australian economy. Because I just think that now is a really good time to be doing that as the mining industry takes another hit. So, and this is life, this is change, but we'll just keep creating, and we will weather the storms as such.
Indeed. Now, where can people, after having listened to this podcast, find you online?
So if you're interested in writing and self-publishing and book marketing, then thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And I also have the Creative Penn podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and all of that. And if you're interested in my fiction, it's at jfpenn.com, F for Francis. And you can get a free book there, Day of the Vikings, if you're interested. And I'm on Twitter at the Creative Penn.
Joanna, after having listened to many episodes of your podcast, it has been an absolute pleasure to actually talk with you about what you love to do finally. So once again, thank you very much for coming on the show.
No worries. Thanks, Rob, and have a great evening.
You too. Well, morning day.